The African Union Summit just kicked off this year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopian capital, and someone is not invited because he's been a naughty, naughty boy. And we're going to talk about him through the rest of the whole video, actually. Just 37 years old, Captain and Head of State Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso has become one of Africa's most popular presidents. If I report the news without the Western spin, think of this guy as governing his country without the Western strings. I'm quite happy with that line. Anyway, specifically, France, according to many reports, is very unhappy, and France-connected groups have tried to take him out, if you know what I mean, list him on the stock market, to use a Chinese euphemism. So far, they have failed. He's still alive. Traoré, for the time being, seems to have successfully surrounded himself with loyal men and security forces hefty enough to dodge those agents of the former colonizers and their besties. Traoré is much loved and much hated, essentially, for the same reason. He's loved and hated. He is, you see, geopolitically speaking, analytically speaking, an emissary of change in Africa. And for those who are happy with Africa as it is, no change needed, that's bad news. Traoré is bad news. And for those who want change, he's a leading figure. He took control of his country through a military coup. So not democratically. That must mean he's evil, surely, right? But it's hard to deny the advances that he has made for his country since he seized power in September of 2022. Paved roads where none existed before, a ban on exporting the precious gold of Burkina Faso without refining it, the setting up of a gold refinery to refine the gold I just said is banned from being exported raw, and processed gold in great amounts, 150 tons a year, I believe, can now be processed within the country. That can then be sold at a significantly higher price. He's nationalized 2 of the gold mines that were owned by London-based companies, in fact, because the terms were deemed exploitative. Nationalizing is when you take a private company's assets, you seize it, and you start operating it, or you give the operation of those assets to another company directed by the state. So it's quite destabilizing and reduces trust in your government, because companies think, if I invest in this country, he's upset with me, man's just going to seize my stuff. Yes, true, it does reduce trust. But if the situation looks exploitative, companies are seen as benefiting at the spectacular expense, for example, of the citizenry or the nation that the company is operating in, then a nation can often do this, even absorbing the reputational damage that comes with forced nationalization. And that's just gold, everything I just talked about. That's one facet only of the economy. So yeah, he's done much that is good for his nation, and he's a bit of a problem for those who want to maintain the post-colonial order in Africa. He's a leader now associated with Pan-Africanism, this idea of an Africa-wide change, a continent-spanning change that throws off the shackles of history, essentially, challenging what he calls Western imperialism and neo-colonialism, meaning new colonialism, but in a modern sort of flavor. His message resonates deeply across Africa, where many question why resource-rich nations remain impoverished even after decades of freedom from colonial rule. You have democracy. Isn't that like the guiding light of all humanity? Why are you still poor, mate? Every party, it seems, in many African countries just use funds to hold elections, potentially rigged ones, and while the elites argue and jostle for power every few years, you got a new president, you got a new prime minister, you got a new cabinet, you got a new parliament, the riches of Africa, whoever's in power, seems to continue to flow out of the continent to the richer parts of the world very smoothly, no friction there at all. So what's democracy got these African nations? That's a critical question. And it's a dangerous one. It sets people, his Ibrahim Traoré types set people up to ask questions considered very dangerous in the leading bloc on the world stage to this day, the Western world, though of course their influence is diminishing as we move to multipolarity, not led solely by the US. But it makes people ask a dangerous question. Is democracy the holy grail of governance? If it is, why is Africa and African countries doing so poorly even when they have democracy? And why is the largest supporter of investment and infrastructure into the whole continent itself not a democratic country by the definitions of the liberal Western world? China. China is investing heavily in Africa, and China is not a democracy in the Western sense. The world is shifting, and Burkina Faso, with its military head of state, Ibrahim Traoré, might be a symbol of what is to come ahead. If the old world of Europe gets bogged down trying to defend itself from the cold winds blowing in from the east, and the US retreats to its home continents in the Western Hemisphere, North and South America, to focus on China across the Pacific, then Africa might see less help and harm from outside its continent and from beyond its immediate neighbors. For example, some Middle Eastern countries are really close to Africa on the eastern side. In such a scenario where foreign intervention, foreign aid, foreign everything sort of just drifts away from the continent, in such a scenario, nations may shift gears in Africa and transform into different beasts altogether, for better or worse. Time will tell, and I'll keep reporting on it, with the news and the analysis, unbiased and without the Western spin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mahfouz /News Baba, and I'll see you on the next one.